During the frenzied expansion of the American frontier, certain settlements earned enduring notoriety for their volatile environments and lethal reputations. With rows of saloons, dance halls, and gambling dens catering to restless drifters, outlaws, and entrepreneurs alike, these boomtowns served as both beacons of opportunity and centers of ruthless conflict. Tempers ran high in dusty streets where newly rich prospectors and rowdy cattle drovers converged in search of quick fortunes. Scattered law enforcement and fledgling judicial systems struggled to preserve order, leading to vigilante justice and frequent shootouts. Fabled marshals and legendary desperados battled for supremacy, leaving residents caught in the crossfire. Over time, these dangerous locales evolved as civic reforms and shifting economies imposed stability, but their troubled histories remain forever emblematic of the Wild West's legendary bloodstained mystique. Cheyenne, Wyoming. Cheyenne, founded in 1867 along the path of the Union Pacific Railroad, gained a reputation for wild and restless activity as prospectors, ranch hands, and fortune seekers converged in pursuit of new opportunities. Early law enforcement was thin, relying on makeshift vigilante groups and limited legal structures. Saloons and gambling halls mushroomed overnight, encouraging reckless behavior and fierce disputes. Gunfights erupted when drunken brawls turned fatal, contributing to the estimated 30 to 40 violent deaths that scarred Cheyenne's early years. Con men and rustlers prowled the dusty streets, capitalizing on the lack of order. Over time, the establishment of stronger municipal governance and the arrival of more reliable marshals helped tame the territory. The city ultimately evolved into the capital of Wyoming, but its stormy frontier legacy persists in local lore. Wichita, Kansas. Wichita emerged in the late 1860s as a crucial cattle shipping point along the Chisholm Trail, beckoning cowboys flush with wages and eager for entertainment. Saloons and brothels sprang up to meet their desires, but unbridled indulgence often led to feuds that rapidly ended in deadly shootouts. The early city council wrestled with lawlessness, and vigilante justice sometimes replaced the short supply of official marshals. Historians approximate between 40 and 50 homicides during Wichita's roughest decade, as drunken conflicts over gambling debts or stolen horses escalated uncontrollably. Legendary lawmen like Wyatt Earp and James E. Masterson briefly instituted order, but the atmosphere remained tense. Over time, emerging commerce and stronger oversight stabilized the streets, allowing Wichita to shed its violent past and evolve into a thriving center of industry and agriculture. Abilene, Kansas. Abilene rose to prominence in the late 1860s as an important railhead where massive herds from Texas concluded their cattle drives. The steady flow of rough-hewn cowboys, fresh off the trail with pay to burn, transformed the town's saloons and gambling parlors into hotbeds of conflict. Gunfights erupted over cheating accusations, personal slights, or general rowdiness, and sudden shootouts, driving historians to estimate between 50 and 60 violent deaths during Abilene's heyday. Wild Bill Hickok famously served as marshal, attempting to impose order through his quick draw and stern presence. However, rowdy drifters still tested the limits of any imposed law. Over time, local ordinances prohibited openly carrying firearms, and the cessation of major cattle trails diminished tensions. Abilene's transition into a more stable community eventually overshadowed its violent past. Fort Griffin, Texas. Fort Griffin took shape in the late 1860s near the Clear Fork of the Brazos River, initially anchored by a military post meant to safeguard settlers. Instead, the settlement, known locally as the Flat, devolved into a magnet for gamblers, drifters, and outlaws seeking unregulated opportunity. Saloons, dance halls, and illicit trade centers proliferated, prompting repeated brawls and gunfights. Historians estimate that between 60 and 70 people met violent ends during Fort Griffin's fiercest phase. Notorious figures like Doc Holliday occasionally surfaced, adding to the town's lethal allure. Military personnel aimed to uphold peace, but sometimes fueled chaos when off-duty misconduct erupted into clashes. As the buffalo trade waned and the fort closed in the 1880s, the once thriving haven for frontier desperados declined, leaving behind tales of lawless nights and fleeting fortunes. Leadville, Colorado. Leadville soared to prominence in the late 1870s, perched high in Colorado's Rocky Mountains after silver discoveries ignited a furious mining rush. Adventurers, speculators, and criminals flooded the town, building flimsy shacks and raucous saloons in the shadow of looming peaks. Fortunes could be won or lost overnight, fueling mistrust and sparking bloody disagreements. Historians approximate that between 70 and 80 murders occurred during Leadville's most chaotic stretch, when vigilante justice often overshadowed any official policing. Gunfights broke out over contested claims, rigged card games, or simmering personal grudges. Corrupt public officials sometimes abetted the mayhem, profiting from bribes or undisclosed partnerships. Eventually, the mining frenzy waned, and rising civic structures tamed the lawlessness. Though Leadville's heyday was brief, its lethal frontier aura continues to fascinate historians and tourists alike. Bod California. Bod began humbly in 1859 as a small mining camp, but a surge of gold discoveries in the late 1870s turned it into a bustling boomtown. Its population soared past 7,000, and saloons, gambling dens, and brothels proliferated, outnumbering more respectable establishments. Conflict flared in this rough-and-tumble environment, with gunfights erupting over unpaid debts, mining claim disputes, or perceived insults. Scholars assert that between 80 and 90 murders occurred during Bod's most savage years, lending the settlement its infamous nickname, a Sea of Sin. Local law enforcement was limited, forcing many citizens to rely on vigilante committees for justice. Yet the harsh desert climate and remote location took a toll. As gold veins diminished by the 1880s, Bod's population dwindled, leaving behind a ghost town steeped in tragic lore. Deadwood, South Dakota. Deadwood exploded onto the scene in 1876, spurred by gold strikes in the Black Hills that enticed thousands of prospectors, gamblers, and opportunists. Makeshift tents and hastily built saloons spread across the rugged gulches, often creating a volatile atmosphere fueled by greed and liquor. Gunfights were common, and violent feuds flared over gambling debts, mining claims, or personal slights. Historians estimate that between 90 and 100 people died in confrontations during Deadwood's chaotic infancy. Legendary figures like Wild Bill Hickok roamed these muddy streets, his infamous murder at Saloon No. 10 echoing the town's perilous spirit. With law enforcement scarce, vigilante groups occasionally imposed harsh justice. Over time, Deadwood attracted bankers, merchants, and families who demanded stability, but the town's early bloodshed remains etched into its enduring frontier mythos. Dodge City, Kansas. Dodge City sprang up in 1872 along the Santa Fe Trail, quickly becoming notorious for its saloons, brothels, and high-stakes gambling halls. Rowdy cattle drovers fresh off the trail arrived with fists and firearms ready, while opportunistic outlaws prowled for easy targets. The resulting tensions frequently boiled over, leading historians to estimate between 100 and 110 violent deaths at the height of Dodge City's infamy. Legendary lawmen like Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson patrolled dusty Front Street, occasionally clashing with formidable gunslingers. Tales of shootouts and brawls spread widely, fueling the town's fearsome reputation as the Queen of the Cowtowns. Over time, local ordinances restricting firearms combined with shifts in the cattle trade reduced the chaos. Nevertheless, Dodge City's place in Wild West lore remains indelible. Tombstone, Arizona. Tombstone erupted in 1877 when silver discoveries in Arizona's desert drew a flood of prospectors, merchants, and thieves in search of quick wealth. Saloons, dance halls, and gambling dens lined the dusty streets, fanning tensions and fueling rivalries that often escalated overnight. Historians suggest that Tombstone witnessed between 110 and 120 violent deaths during its turbulent peak, as lawlessness thrived under competing factions. The Earp brothers and Doc Holliday tangled with the Cochise County Cowboys, culminating in the 1881 gunfight at the OK Corral. This confrontation scarred the town's reputation, prompting vigilante retaliation and ongoing feuds. Despite efforts to impose order, stagecoach robberies and shootouts persisted, leaving locals wary. When silver veins eventually ran dry, Tombstone declined, though its bloody lore continues to attract fascinated visitors. El Paso, Texas. El Paso flourished on the Texas-Mexico border, luring traders, smugglers, and desperados who thrived in its transient bilingual milieu. By the 1880s, whiskey peddlers, cattle rustlers, and gun runners roamed freely, emboldened by porous boundaries and inconsistent policing. Tensions spiked as rival gangs vied for control over lucrative enterprises, leading historians to estimate between 120 and 130 murders during El Paso's most violent chapter. The infamous John Wesley Hardin spent time here, amplifying the city's bloody notoriety. Corruption and cross-border escapes hampered law enforcement, allowing criminals to slip away after deadly skirmishes. Ultimately, federal intervention and the growth of official municipal structures helped quell the bedlam. Although El Paso evolved into a bustling metropolis, its frontier epic remains a glaring testament to the Old West's lethal extremes. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below.